What up, everybody, and welcome back to yet another Sound of Violence Daily MMA Podcast recap for April 8th, 2020. I am Pulver, and we are doing the damn thing yet again. Just before I went live right now, we just posted our commentary track that Chris and I did for the MMA movie Locked Down from 2010, which has Kimbo Slice and Bai Ling and Rashad Evans. I think somebody else too, but I don't remember off the top of my head. It's a pretty fun one, and we had a good time with it, so I'm excited for that. I'm also excited about some of the shows I listened to today. It's been a good week for MMA podcasts, man. Like, a lot of shows have fallen off a cliff. There are, let's just say, some of the most prominent MMA reporters for the outlet that broadcasts the UFC. Reporters. And they are evidently almost losing shows right now because they can't figure out how to record, which I know they're not recording locally, the two people, the two hosts, which means there's also a producer. So theoretically, there should be a minimum of 3 copies of that recording. There should be 6 copies of that recording because they should each be having a backup file running as well. So what the fuck, ESPN? Luckily, evidently, their producer did have a backup file, which good, you should. It's how recording works. Man, it blows my mind how bad some of these shows are doing with just like 2010 YouTube stuff. Like from a decade ago is about where they seem to be operating at. And they're still like doing Instagram live fucking video. Anyway, drives me nuts. But we're not here to talk about that boring shit. We are here to talk about, well, first off, this great beer, AleSmith 394. You're going to see me drinking a lot of this because I've got 2 cases of it. I've got a case and a half. I have more than a case and a half, so I have like a case and 3/4, I think. Hopefully not after tonight. Heyo! Although I have a bunch of casks back there from, must have been almost a month ago now that I need to drink. But yeah, 394 is still fucking delicious from AleSmith. Also, they just announced they have a hazy version of 394 they're going to be putting out, which fucking I'm interested. And these were brewed on, or canned on rather, I think there's a date on these fuckers. Yeah, 3/24/20. So these are about, that does not like zooming on that. These are, like 3 weeks old? 2 weeks old? Something like that. And yeah, it's a fantastic pale ale. Not a sponsor, apart from them accidentally sending me 2 cases instead of 1. I don't know if that counts as a sponsor, but I'm disclosing it, so you guys at least know. But yeah, really good pale ale. One of my go-tos. Like I said yesterday, I guess it was. It's definitely the new Sculpin down here in San Diego. For just like a beer you can get literally almost everywhere that is also better than Sculpin. Speaking of which, I think Ballast Point said they're doing Habanero Sculpin again, which is like, because they did a poll to like see like, oh, which old beer should we bring back? You're like, fucking obviously it was going to be a Sculpin variant because that's all anyone buys from you anymore. And second off, obviously it's going to be fucking Habanero Sculpin because all the other Sculpin varieties, apart from grapefruit, were pretty sus. So, yeah, that's been weird. But anyway, I guess we should get into podcasts. Of course, this morning I listened to almost did it again. Every goddamn day I have this problem. Quarantine Radio from ItsTheReal. They had, Johnny Shipes, Brocky Marciano, and Michi on from Flatbush Zombies. And yeah, I really liked it. It's good. I just love that show. It makes me feel better, like I've talked about a whole bunch. Let us see. So I guess the first thing I should get to, I should close my fucking editing program just to save fucking resources. All right. So, yesterday after I recorded the daily episode, I listened to, as I mentioned, I was going to Severe MMA Podcast Premium episode with Shawnee Podcasts and Andrew Fuck, what is Andrew's last name? That's going to drive me nuts. Let me look at Shawnee Podcast Twitter. I guess I could look at my Twitter. That's probably going to be quicker. Well, I don't know, since me and Sean are both tweeting too much during this shit. Although Sean's are way more The Wire related, which I do appreciate the fuck out of. Actually, yeah, no, that was a couple days ago, so I'm going to look at my own Twitter to figure out what Andrew's last motherfucking name is, because I do not remember. Andy Stevenson. Fucking duh. It's because I kept calling him Andrew, which was fucking me up. Yeah, Andy Stevenson was great. He's been on a bunch of stuff with Sean in the past, and this was a hilarious show they did. Normally, this is the kind of thing that I would put as an also ran, as like an honorable mention, kind of not MMA related, well-rounded kind of show. However, they went through, so basically Shawnee Podcast just recently watched Tiger King, so they go through and talk about it, and it's hilarious, as most Tiger King discussions are, and as most things Shawnee Podcast does are. However, after that, after they just kind of recap the show and talk about it a bit, they then do MMA comparisons for all the people on the show, and holy fucking shit are they great. I can't. So here, I'll run through the first couple that they did, like the obvious ones. Like they said, Carol Baskins is obviously either Diego Sanchez or Ronda Rousey, which I thought was amazing. They said Joe Exotic. They both agreed is obviously Connor, which I also amazing. And then they also pick who the MMA equivalent is for Doc Antle, Howard, which is Carol's new husband, John Lewis, John Reinke, Saf, Eric, Jeff Lowe, who is basically every MMA promoter that's ever existed, and John Finley. And I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna give away. Shawnee Podcast hints very, very subtly at one that he can't say on the show. And holy fucking shit, it's good. If you do the math and you really dig, you can figure it out. But man, it's everything about those comparisons were great. I died laughing at a bunch of. I literally had to stop cooking dinner because I was laughing too hard at some of them. So I cannot recommend that enough. I've been talking to Shawnee Podcast a lot this week, and it's been interesting. It's been interesting hearing his take on how. I mean, he's one of the people, I'm sure if you follow him on Twitter, you've been seeing where his mentions, like ours in the last day or two, have been completely on fire, and just with, like, the most mouth breathers. And so it's interesting going back and forth with him a bit recently, and he's had some interesting stuff. He actually gave me a suggestion for some stuff we can do on this show that might be interesting. So I'm still trying to kind of work out the kinks on how to best do that, but yeah, me and Chris might change up the format a little bit, at least for the next. I mean, I'll say the next week, because obviously we're all going to be talking about Tachi Palace fights the week after that, I guess. Can't wait for TJ DeSantis to be on the call. What the fuck is going on in MMA? Anyway, so Responsible Adult, I also listened to Responsible Adult, Trent Reinsmith this week. Or today, I should say, rather, with the Cmon Now episode 29 podcast, which was really good. It's a lot about why MMA media needs to start questioning Dana and everyone involved in this event very, very strictly and clearly, because all these vague, like, oh, we always have we always are looking out for safety. It's our number one concern anytime we do an event. Even though we didn't drug test, or we didn't test people for COVID during a motherfucking global pandemic's redundant. During a motherfucking pandemic, it's frustrating. And yeah, it's just interesting hearing his take. I really like. He's very staunch about, which I wish more people were. Trent Reinsmith is very staunch about media's role and kind of not just like AP ethics guidelines, which I'm pretty sure doesn't exist in MMA for majority of people working. Like, I don't want to call out the journalist who I engaged with recently on Twitter. I'll say via Camel McLaren, and you guys can look at who it is. But there's a weird thing where people get praised by promoters and then back the promoter and only write fluff pieces for the promoter and then try and write like very generic, hey, what's everyone want? Like, just, they do that shitty thing that, I was gonna say they do that shitty thing that Cyborg's social media team does, where they just ask generic questions on Twitter to up the replies and responses they get. They're like, what's everybody doing for the weekend? Or like, what movies or books should I be reading? Where it's just like, I don't think they actually care about the replies because they do it every day. Also, this person may or may not have close ties to Cyborg, and I'm not convinced they don't also work on Cyborg's social media team, which has got to be a conflict of interest on top of the conflict of interest with Campbell McLaren, on top of that same journalist also being... you can look at her Twitter where she has pictures wearing one championship sweatshirts and being like, oh, I'm so glad I can fit into my one championship sweatshirt. And also randomly being able to fly to Asia to cover one event for a very small outlet that probably, I would assume, isn't just flying reporters on the other side of the planet. Anyway, this is me being a grumpy bitch about everything, because I just wish there was any kind of checks and balance system in MMA media. And as far as I can tell, it's Trent Rhinesmith and Shawnee Podcast and Luke Thomas before yesterday. So, I don't fucking know, man. And the Bloody Elbow guys, obviously. But, boy, man. That's one thing I will say. It's been a very weird, like, as someone who for a very long time said, like, oh yeah, a lot of the MMA media... I think specifically the MMA media gives the MMA media too much credit, because there are people doing great work, but a fuckload of them are just trying to appeal to as many people as possible to get as many clicks as possible, and really don't give a fuck other than their paycheck. Which, like, I get, but, like, also no one should respect or appreciate what you're doing, because it's not helpful for anyone but yourself. It's, you know what? Kind of like Dana White and Endeavor, where they're like, well, yeah, like, we're not going to help or actually move anything forward for the sport or for anyone involved in it, but, like, we'll definitely just do generic things that require the least amount of work and get us the most profit, despite what it does negatively. That's definitely going to happen. So that's frustrating. Well, I'm not even going to make this segue. We'll just say this segue is implied. Next up, I watched the Triple G Show, episode 66. That number seems wrong. I don't think it was number 66. Shit, did I also delete it off my... Of course I did. Oh, God. Let me try and look this up. Fucking... The one thing about Patreon podcasts is that they are never listed the way you think they would be listed. So I can never find them because they're never... There it is. Yeah, it was episode 66. I'm a big old dummy. I did write the right notes. Yeah. The Triple G Show and MMA Junkie Radio seem to kind of be losing their minds right now because they don't know what to talk about. I mean, to be fair to them, it's gotten easier over the last week with just like, well... It's gotten somewhat easier. I mean, you know they're not going to at all address... You know what? Let's say if Trent Rhinesmith is in the category for responsible adults talking responsibly about coronavirus and the UFC's involvement or lack thereof in its regulation, let's go to people who are not responsible about any of those statements and do not hold organizations at all accountable because they're afraid of losing access to both fighters and to organizations. So, Triple G Show. To be fair, only 2 of the 3 people on this show act like that. The other one is constantly being like, yeah, it's probably really shitty and shady for the UFC to be taking backward steps and going to Tachi Palace during a fucking pandemic. Shouts to Richard Hunter. But yeah, I mean, even if, I will give some credit. Gorgeous George and Goes are at least being like, man, it is... I think a lot of times they're just saying, like, it's weird that the UFC is just not answering questions, and they're just kind of going rogue and avoiding details and stuff. They even hint at some point that clearly they're not saying something about the UFC is not saying something, or Endeavor is not saying something about their financials that needs to be said, which is like, that's huge for them, because normally they avoid all of these topics. However, since right now they're the only topics to talk about, it's interesting to hear them kind of play that line and kind of not overstep bounds and get emails, or they don't have to turn off their fax machine, as Jeff Sherwood would say. But yeah, it's weird. It's weird hearing them kind of try and like balance that, like thread that needle, you know. I do really appreciate though Richard Hunter on that show, because Richard Hunter is absolutely the dude who's like, Richard Hunter is from like a fucking radio and comedy background. Like, he's in MMA journalism not at all as a job. Like, I don't know that he makes money from it, but if he does, it's not what he mainly makes money from. And so it gives him the kind of freedom to be like, yeah, it's fucking insane. Like, the UFC clearly is just taking crazy backward steps, and the best we can hope for with shit like this is that down the line it looks like we were being overreactive. So I do appreciate Richard on that show, but man, they're walking a real thin line on that show of being just completely being dismissible as any kind of people you should listen to outside of, hey, do you want to hear fucking softballs lobbed at fighters about how their weight cut's going? Because if you want to hear that, they can definitely ask those questions. Or like, there's a lot of, here's an example. At the beginning of this episode, Gorgeous George talks quite a bit about how a lot of his texts with fighters right now is like the balance of like, oh, well, when you talk to people right now, you have to be like, oh, like, how you doing? And then, like, you know, they say how they're doing, and then, like, oh, what if, and then, like, you get a couple exchanges back and forth, and then they're like, oh, how are your parents? You're like, fuck, I should ask about their parents first. And then, now that you've had a dialogue, then you're like, oh, do you want to come on the show, or what are you doing? Or, it's like, first off, not at all on the air content. It's not on the air content. Nobody needs to hear it. It doesn't do anything for anybody. It's not like anyone listening is having those experiences. And also, it's a very good indicator of how access-driven their whole business model is and always has been. I don't know, man. I like that show. I like both. Like, I'm sure I would have a great time having beers with George and Goes. They seem like very cool dudes. It seems like they care way more about access than they do about actually having a conversation about anything relevant, or at all, ever having a dissenting opinion against anyone who could get them access. Like, fucking Gorgeous George last week stand for Mookie and Ali the entire episode, while Richard Hunter's like, yeah, they're clearly bad people, and they just like act like fuck. It drives me nuts. Anyway. This is not a full episode, so I should stop blabbering. I get going on these things, and it becomes a whole thing. Back to the responsible camp of adults. Protect Your Neck, episode 180. This is not really at all like this. If you're looking for a podcast, it's not at all Corona related or COVID related. This is absolutely one you can go to. Dan Tom had Simon Head on to talk about the top 5 light heavyweight fights ever. Really good stuff, like obviously Arona Rampage, John vs. Gus, whole bunch of different fights, whole bunch of different organizations. Really good episode. And again, if you're looking for content that's not at all doom and gloom and the reality of life, that's a good one to kind of get away. Let's see, weighing in, episode 49 with Ben Askren was pretty good. Speaking of people who, Ben Askren has a more nuanced opinion on a lot of that stuff than he lets on, but he also just shitposts a lot of times too. Like, he's also one of those dudes like, we need to get back to work. You're like, motherfucker, you're doing fine. Like, you got multiple incomes that don't involve going anywhere. You all right. but yeah, it's interesting. I like the episode though. Talks about how high school wrestling and all wrestling is shut down right now. And they talk a lot about 249 and how to try and make it happen. This was recorded, I think, on Sunday, I want to say, very early in the week, before any of the news broke. And Askren did say at one point, like, the only way to get this done is to literally have, like, privately fly everyone in and not tell anyone where the event is taking place. Which, spoiler, that doesn't work in the year 2020, y'all. Like, fucking Jeff Sherwood isn't going to know you're going to Tachi Palace. What are you doing? Jeff Sherwood goddamn near lives at Tachi Palace. Whenever the UFC even mentions Tachi Palace, Jeff Sherwood gets a phone call. Let's see. Or TJ DeSantis, at least. Jesus. Let's see. Also in that... Oh, they talk a lot about kind of Askren's UFC run. Like, the differences... One thing that was interesting is hearing Askren talk about the difference between Aoki and Maya on the ground, which is kind of cool. And... Ben also in this episode actually mentioned that Bjorn offered... At one point, Bjorn reached out to Dana saying, hey, if you let GSP and Askren fight, they can fight in the UFC, and you can have his contract if GSP wins. And evidently, Ben thinks that's probably part of the reason why Dana had such a fucking problem with him. Which is a bummer, but like... Man... To be fair, I fucks with that. And if you're ever, like, not the worst move ever by Bjorn to be like, what if I offer Dana a bet? Like, Dana loves betting. What if I offer him a bet? It's not the worst call. Aaron Bronstedter's gotten some of the greatest answers of all time out of Dana by doing almost that exact same bit. Let's see. 6th round retro with Eddie Mercado and Vic Rodriguez on Bloody Elbow is really good. They did UFC 84. I like that one quite a bit. MMA Yesterday with Keith Schillen and Kyle Steele on the Loudmouth MMA Network was very solid as well for UFC 42. That's a crazy card for a lot of reasons, but I really like that quite a bit. Coast to Coast Combat Hour with Jonathan Burke. Jonathan Burke's one of the early training partners of students of Hoist Gracie way back in the day. Like prior to UFC 1, he says he went out and started training with Hoist. And he was in Hoist's corner or on his team for like pride fights and all that stuff. So it was cool hearing about like the early days of the Gracie Academy and growing up training with Hoist, training with guys like Ed O'Neill, that kind of stuff. Pretty cool. I actually really recommend that show. It was a lot of fun. And then lastly, I listened to If the Shoes Fit. Holy fuck, you guys. The UFC finally did enough horrible, world-breaking things that they not only broke into the New York Times yet again... I'm going to avoid the joke I was going to make, but let's just say it's a reference to an Irish athlete in the New York Times. I'm really trying not to make horrible jokes. So if the shoes fit, since the UFC decided to forcibly fuck their way back into the mainstream media, they did an episode called UFC Island. I apologize. So the first question was, you're the UFC, are you really flying fighters to an island? And they talk about how insane it is that Dana White's just like, clearly Endeavor is losing their 241 or 42, if I remember right. If it's right around that range. If they put on that number of events this year, then they can still get like the, whatever it is, $750 million from ESPN or whatever, but they have to meet that quota, which it's starting to look like it's going to be real tough since I think they're only like 10 or so in, something like that. Maybe 20. No, they're not 20. They're like, it was like 10, I think. They're a long ways off, so that was interesting to hear. A lot of talk about Tachi. So, I mean, Eugene's fought at fucking Tachi Palace back in the day. Although just about everybody, I feel like, who's ever fought at Tachi Palace at some point if you lived in California. It's a lot of focus on the California State Athletic Commission, trying to, how that's all going to be dealt with, how even getting fighters to places is going to be dealt with, and whether the governor is going to step in. Since evidently there is a precedent for California. I believe John Nash said is one of. Oh, I should mention John Nash is the guest on this one. I think he always is on. Right, he's permanent on If the Shoes Fit now, or like mostly permanent. Well, I guess nowadays he's probably more permanent, but yeah, evidently California is one of 5 states that have the jurisdiction to step in and press criminal charges against someone on Native American land, like on a reservation, as long as it's a non-resident. From my understanding, as long as it's an event between non-residents of the reservation, then the government is able to step in, and it's only like I think 5 states, and California is one. So that's kind of interesting, especially with Gavin Newsom being super fucking hard on everything pretty early on, and like being very, very clear on his statements. I really don't think this card is happening, but we will get to that more later in the week. Although by the time we record on Saturday, it's probably gonna be canceled, I would assume. And then lastly, Dana White enters the Legion of Doom for, I think, the first time ever. I don't know if John Nash ever actually inducted Dana White into the Legion of Doom. But, spoiler alert, this is probably, assuming that Fight Island doesn't get completely debunked by Saturday, which, I mean, is very possible. I'm sure somebody's going to figure out. I mean, there's already people out there, I want to say it's not the lead singer of Incubus. Is it Brandon Boyd? Not the lead singer of Incubus, the CME fan who's been tweeting to Ben Folks. I believe that's who it was, who said, like, hey, by the way, Endeavor clients, Tyler Perry and Eddie Murphy? I want to say Eddie Murphy and Tyler Perry both own islands. And Eddie Murphy and Dana White were at a basketball game in February. It's like, that's kind of interesting. That kind of checks out. Although Dana did hint that he mostly hinted it seems like it's going to be for UK fighters, which I would think would mean it's going to be towards Europe. I don't know. It's all bullshit, and none of it's going to happen anyway. Because, spoiler alert, islands are owned by governments. Like, good fucking luck finding an island that's not owned by a government at this point in time. The fuck, people? Like, private islands, still owned by governments. Or at least the majority of them, unless Dana's just fucking children on Epstein's island and putting on fights there. I'm going to go ahead and say that was a joke right after I said that, just so I don't get a fact. Hey, I don't got a fax machine. I don't got shit to worry about, I guess. But yeah, anyway. You probably will hear the clip of John Nash talking about how Dana's entering the Legion of Doom, because holy fuck does he make a good argument. I also just want to give a great shout out to my own tweet this week, which was, I believe, I want to say Damon Martin replied to John Nash on Twitter when he tweeted out something like that. This is just a plot of every fucking evil, like, dictator plot line in every movie. I believe it was Damon Martin that's like, oh, Dana's definitely going to hold a battle royale or something along those lines, which I really appreciated the joke that obviously Dana White has not watched Battle Royale, but he's going to be super excited when the remake comes out that is overdubbed, because you know that motherfucker's not reading that movie. It's good stuff. By the way, if you have not seen Battle Royale, holy fuck is Battle Royale good. Was there a remake of Battle Royale, actually? I want to say there was, right? Because if you guys don't know, Battle Royale is a great movie from 2000, a Japanese movie where they basically drop, I don't remember if it was 50 or 100. I think it's 100. They drop 100 students on an island, give them each a weapon, and the last person to get off the island gets to live. And it's fucking cool. Remake. Oh, good. Oh, good. You know what? Hey, guys, good news. The Hunger Games did something positive, which is it prevented a remake of Battle Royale. Because it would, quote-unquote, no longer be necessary due to the release of Hunger Games, stating that audiences would see it as just a copy of games. Holy fuck, white people are stupid. That is the dumb... I want to just repeat that back. They didn't want to make a remake of Battle Royale, which Hunger Games at least partially was based on, because they were worried the Battle Royale remake would seem redundant to Hunger Games. Oh, my people are dumb. Jesus Christ. Anyway, holy fuck, that is... Wow. Sorry, I did not mean to just get way off topic right now, but Jesus, that is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. Okay, oh god, how do we get away from this? Okay, so what I have queued up to listen to, Jesus, that's stupid. That's so fucking stupid. That's the most LA shit I've ever heard in my life. You know that shit was said at fucking... I'm not... Oh my god. Anyway... it's a good segue from there. So what I've queued up is V108 of the Eugene S. Robinson Show Stomper. So I have a feeling that motherfucker is going to have some amazing takes this week. So that's on my list. Also on my list, Deciding Splits, which is a podcast hosted by Manpreet Joss. I'm probably fucking dude's name up so bad. You guys would know him as MMA LOTN on Twitter, or MMA Lock of the Night. He has a show with Tony Quattro, whose name I'm also fucking up, called Deciding Splits, where they rewatch old split decisions and kind of give their takes on the scoring, which I think is really cool. And I don't know that this is the problem, is I've listened to so many shows at this point, and if I only catch one or two of them, it's hard to remember if I've actually seen them all. So I don't hear. You know what? I can do this. This is why. By the way, we have a search function on our website, not to help you guys, although I'm sure it does. If you want to find anything you can, or anything you want, like if you have a show and you wonder if we talked about your show, type your name of the show in the search function and it will come up. It's Deciding Splits, right? Deciding Splits. The reason I have this is so that I remember what shows we've covered. No, we have not covered Deciding Splits, so that may very well be a new show for me this week, and I'm pretty hyped about it. Other than that, The Writer and the Fighter, episode 64. I know that this one, there's a lot of UFC 249 talk, and they also, in the video description, have that Mixedly, Jake Smith's girlfriend, interrupts a bunch, which, that should be funny. That should be real funny. Just as someone who has a girl, Jake Smith is much funnier than I am when I'm interrupted during a show, because I just go deadpan and look to the side while I mute my mic because I have someone who can cover for me, whereas Jake Smith will just drag her into the conversation like, no, you want to talk, let's talk, because I'm going to roast the fuck out of you right now. How's the chicken skin game going? And it's good shit. So I am excited for that. Also, other stuff I have queued up that I have not yet got to. Here, I'll just rattle these off here real quick. Last one standing, number 2, which is the Between the Links remake, or whatever, the new version of Between the Links on Loudmouth MMA Network. Like I said yesterday, I still have MMA Roasted 500 with Jason Mayhem Miller, Chase Hooper, and Sadiq Youssef. Fight Site MMA podcast, I believe it's episode 10. Wrestling for MMA, episode 3. Shawnee Podcast had a talk with Jake Smith, the MMA reporter, about Northeast MMA, which I think is going to be pretty cool. CME Patreon for the Not So Live chat for today, actually. I'm excited to check out MMA Stories with Monty Cox and Jeremy Horn about how the pandemic has affected Monty's MMA plans, and the one time that Jeremy Horn came to almost fight on a battleship. You know that's on my list. Mike Swick's podcast is back with Quarantine Number 1 with Tyron Woodley. I don't know what the fuck that means, but I'm excited about it. Episode 260 of Beer Night in San Diego, presented by... Why can I not remember what they're presented by? I know what it is because it's there. Oh my god, I've said it a bunch of times on the show. Anyway, if you look up Beer Night in San Diego, They do good shit, and they did episode 260. They're still like going through and ordering beer from everywhere down here, so I definitely recommend that. Fight flashback for UFC 199 on The Man and the Myth, where they went back and watched UFC 199. I'm excited for that. Sports Middle, episode 5, where they talk about secret islands and crystal mazes. I'm just really excited to hear a bunch of non-MMA fans react to what the fuck is happening with the UFC right now. Because I have a feeling they're going to be very confused and either super excited or super concerned. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then also on my list is Top Turtle MMA episode 215. They did an MMA draft and they have an interview with Manel Cape, or Cape. I believe it's Cape, right? Who just actually recently signed with the UFC, coming over from Ryzen. So that should be a lot of fun too. So on that note, everybody. I evidently need to clean that piece because I pulled that straight through it. However, I'll be back tomorrow with more of this shit. In the meantime, check out our commentary track for Lockdown from 2010. Movies on Amazon. I think it's like $3 to rent, $4 to rent, SD, something like that. And really, you don't need to watch the HD version unless you really are into biling, I guess. Although the HD version will help you see the hilarious... there's a hilarious part with the money in that movie that I'm not going to spoil it, but it's real dumb. So check that out, and then I'll be back tomorrow. So until next time, everybody, go support your local breweries, and we out. Bye.
Tribal beat.